In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where manicured lawns stretched endlessly and white picket fences stood like sentinels of order, lived Judge Evelyn Harper. To her neighbors, she was just another face in the crowd, a polite woman who kept to herself and occasionally exchanged pleasantries while walking her golden retriever, Max. What they didn't know was that beneath her calm exterior lay the mind of a highly respected judge known for her razor-sharp intellect and unwavering sense of justice. But here, in this sleepy little community, Evelyn preferred to leave her gavel behind and enjoy life away from the pressures of the courtroom. The neighborhood was governed by a homeowners association, HOA, notorious for its strict rules. Every mailbox had to be painted the same shade of beige. No lawn could have more than 3 decorative items at once, and cars older than 5 years were practically treated like eyesores. At the helm of this micromanaged utopia was Karen Whitmore, a woman whose passion for enforcing HOA guidelines bordered on obsessive. Armed with a clipboard, a whistle, and an unshakable belief in her own authority, Karen patrolled the streets daily, ensuring everyone fell in line. She wasn't elected because people liked her. She was elected because nobody dared oppose her. Evelyn initially found Karen's antics amusing. The first time Karen knocked on her door to remind her about the approved flower pot color palette, Evelyn simply smiled, thanked her, and made a mental note to blend in. After all, she valued peace and quiet as much as anyone else. But over time, Karen's behavior began to wear thin. It wasn't just the endless notices about minor infractions. It was the way she spoke down to people, the smug satisfaction she took in issuing fines, and the air of superiority that followed her everywhere. Even Max seemed to bristle whenever Karen walked past their yard. Despite her growing irritation, Evelyn chose not to engage. Her career had taught her the value of patience and picking her battles wisely. Besides, she reasoned, it wasn't worth stirring up trouble over something as trivial as flower pots or mailbox colors. Still, there was a part of her that couldn't help but wonder. Did Karen truly believe she was making the neighborhood better, or did she simply enjoy wielding power over others? Either way, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. Karen's reign wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, someone would challenge her. And when that day came, Evelyn silently hoped she'd be there to witness it. Little did she know, fate had other plans. Her decision to stay out of the fray would soon be tested in ways she never expected. For now, though, Evelyn continued her routine, enjoying quiet evenings, sipping tea on her porch and watching the sunset. The only hint of drama in her life was Karen's occasional drive-by inspection, which usually ended with a disapproving glance at Evelyn's perfectly ordinary sedan, parked neatly in the driveway. If Evelyn noticed these glares, she gave no sign of it. Instead, she focused on appreciating the simplicity of her surroundings, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just around the corner. One crisp morning, Evelyn stepped out of her house with a cup of coffee in hand, ready to enjoy the peaceful start to her day. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood. But as she approached her driveway, her heart skipped a beat. Her sleek black sedan was gone. For a moment, she thought maybe she'd forgotten where she parked it or left it elsewhere the night before. But no, she distinctly remembered pulling into her driveway after running errands the previous evening. Confusion quickly turned to frustration as she noticed a neon pink flyer taped to her front door. The flyer read, Asterisk unauthorized vehicle removal notice. Asterisk, according to the note, someone had reported her car as abandoned and non-compliant with HOA regulations. As a result, it had been towed at the request of the homeowners association. Evelyn's jaw tightened as she read the fine print, which included instructions to contact Elite Towing Services if she wanted her vehicle back. The audacity of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. Her own driveway, the place where she paid taxes and maintained property, was now apparently subject to Karen's absurd interpretation of neighborhood standards. Fuming but determined to stay composed, Evelyn grabbed her phone and dialed the number listed on the flyer. After navigating through an automated menu and waiting on hold for what felt like ages, she finally reached a representative. When she explained the situation, the person on the other end sounded unusually nervous. "Ma'am," they said hesitantly, "we were told your car was causing a disturbance and needed immediate removal. It's currently being held at our secure facility." Evelyn asked for details about the impound lot and was shocked when the address sounded familiar. It was a property she owned. Years ago, during her time as a judge, Evelyn had approved the acquisition of several lots for public use, including one that housed the local towing company's operations. She rarely thought about it now, since the properties were managed by a third-party firm, but this revelation made her blood boil even more. Someone, likely Karen, had flagrantly abused their power, targeting her without realizing who they were dealing with. Instead of demanding her car back immediately, Evelyn decided to visit the lot herself. This wasn't just about retrieving her vehicle anymore. It was about uncovering exactly how far Karen would go to enforce her ridiculous rules. When Evelyn arrived at the impound lot, she was greeted by a flurry of activity. Workers scrambled around, moving cars and organizing paperwork. As soon as they recognized her, however, everything came to a standstill. One employee stammered, "Judge Harper, we didn't realize this was your car." They apologized profusely and offered to release her vehicle free of charge, citing her ownership of the property. But Evelyn waved them off. "No special treatment," she said firmly. "I want you to handle this exactly as you would for anyone else." Her tone left no room for argument. As she left the lot, car keys safely back in her pocket, Evelyn couldn't help but smile. Karen had unknowingly crossed paths with the one person who could dismantle her entire operation. And while Evelyn wasn't one to seek revenge, she knew this was an opportunity to teach the HOA and Karen a valuable lesson about fairness, accountability, and the consequences of abusing authority. Little did Karen know, her days of unchecked power were numbered. Evelyn sat in her car outside the impound lot, gripping the steering wheel as her mind raced. She could feel the anger simmering inside her, but years of experience on the bench had taught her that emotions were a poor substitute for strategy. This wasn't just about her car or Karen's overreach. It was bigger than that. The HOA's actions represented something far more troubling. Unchecked power wielded by someone who believed they were above accountability. Evelyn knew she couldn't let this slide, not because she wanted revenge, but because allowing such behavior to continue would only encourage more of it. Instead of storming back to confront Karen immediately, Evelyn decided to take a step back and observe. She needed to understand how deep this rabbit hole went. Was Karen acting alone, or did others in the HOA share her zeal for petty enforcement? More importantly, how many other residents had been subjected to similar treatment without the means or courage to fight back? Evelyn resolved to play along for now, letting events unfold naturally while gathering information. The next HOA meeting was scheduled just a week later, and word had spread like wildfire about Evelyn's revelation at the previous gathering. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, speculating about what would happen next. Some were excited, eager to see how Karen would respond to being publicly called out by someone who clearly outranked her in both authority and influence. Others were nervous, fearing retaliation from Karen if she felt cornered. But one thing was certain: no one wanted to miss this showdown. Karen, for her part, seemed determined to regain control of the narrative. She arrived at the meeting early, clipboard in hand, wearing her trademark air of superiority. She prepared a presentation, complete with charts and graphs, to justify her actions over the past year, including the towing incident. Her goal was simple: convince everyone that she was acting in the best interest of the neighborhood, even if it meant making tough decisions. What she didn't realize was that Evelyn had already turned the tide against her. As neighbors filed into the community center, Evelyn took a seat near the front, intentionally placing herself within Karen's line of sight. When Karen glanced at her, Evelyn offered a polite smile that somehow managed to unnerve Karen even more. The room buzzed with anticipation as Karen called the meeting to order. She began by reiterating the importance of maintaining high standards in the neighborhood, her voice steady, but tinged with defensiveness. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Karen addressed the towing incident head-on, attempting to frame it as a necessary step to uphold HOA guidelines. "We can't allow exceptions," she said firmly, pacing back and forth. "If we start bending the rules for one person, where does it end? Before you know it, our streets will be filled with abandoned cars and unkempt lawns." She paused dramatically, looking around the room for support, but instead of nods of agreement, she was met with awkward silence. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her expression calm but piercing. When Karen finally asked if anyone had questions or comments, Evelyn raised her hand again. This time, there was no hesitation in her voice as she spoke. "Let's talk about fairness," she began, addressing the entire room rather than just Karen. "I understand the need for rules. They're essential for any community to function. But when those rules are enforced selectively, they lose their purpose. And when they're used to target individuals arbitrarily, they become tools of intimidation rather than protection." She went on to recount specific examples of Karen's behavior, citing instances where other residents had been fined for minor infractions while bigger issues, like a neighbor's overgrown tree blocking sunlight, were ignored. Evelyn's words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom had experienced similar treatment, but never dared to speak up. One woman nodded vigorously, whispering to her husband, "That's exactly what happened to us last summer." Karen tried to interrupt, insisting that she was simply doing her job and following the HOA's bylaws. But Evelyn wasn't finished. With quiet authority, she pointed out the hypocrisy of Karen's actions. "You claim to care about consistency," Evelyn said, her tone measured but firm. "Yet my car, a perfectly functional vehicle parked legally in my own driveway, was deemed abandoned and towed. Meanwhile, some homes have visible code violations that go unaddressed for months. Doesn't that strike anyone else as inconsistent?" The room erupted into murmurs of agreement. Even some of Karen's closest allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact with her. Sensing the shift in momentum, another neighbor stood up to share his own story of being unfairly targeted by Karen. Then another followed, and another, until the meeting transformed into an impromptu forum for airing grievances. For the first time, people felt empowered to speak their minds, emboldened by Evelyn's example. Karen, visibly flustered, tried to regain control by raising her voice and accusing Evelyn of undermining the HOA's mission. But her attempts only made her appear desperate and out of touch. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that her grip on power was slipping. As neighbors filed out of the room, many approached Evelyn to thank her for standing up to Karen. Some even suggested forming a committee to review the HOA's policies and leadership structure. For Evelyn, the victory wasn't personal. It was about restoring balance and accountability to the neighborhood. Still, as she walked home that evening with Max trotting happily beside her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Karen had underestimated her, and now, the consequences of that mistake were beginning to unfold. In the days following the explosive HOA meeting, whispers turned into full-blown conversations throughout the neighborhood. Evelyn's calm yet powerful takedown of Karen had ignited a firestorm of reflection among residents. People who had once cowered under Karen's rule now found themselves questioning everything, from her motivations to the fairness of the HOA's policies. The quiet rebellion that Evelyn had sparked began to take shape as neighbors started sharing their own stories of frustration and injustice. Evelyn wasted no time capitalizing on the momentum. She filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, citing specific instances of harassment and misuse of authority by Karen. Her legal background ensured the document was thorough and irrefutable, complete with timestamps, photographs, and witness statements from other affected residents. It wasn't just about the towing incident anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of behavior that prioritized control over community well-being. Karen, predictably, went on the defensive. She called emergency meetings with her inner circle, trying to rally support and discredit Evelyn's claims. "She's undermining our work," Karen exclaimed during one such gathering, pacing furiously. "If we let her get away with this, what's next? Anarchy." But her attempts to paint Evelyn as an enemy of order fell flat. Even her closest allies were beginning to doubt her leadership, especially after hearing first-hand accounts from other neighbors about how they'd been treated unfairly. Meanwhile, Evelyn took a different approach. Rather than fueling conflict, she focused on building bridges. She organized informal coffee chats at her house, inviting neighbors to discuss their concerns in a safe, judgment-free environment. These gatherings weren't about tearing down Karen. They were about empowering residents to reclaim their voices. Slowly but surely, people began opening up, revealing years of pent-up frustration. One elderly couple shared how Karen had fined them for planting marigolds outside their home because they weren't on the approved flower list. A young family recounted being threatened with penalties when their toddler's toy wagon was left in the driveway overnight. As these stories circulated, public opinion shifted dramatically against Karen. What had once seemed like harmless nitpicking now appeared as outright bullying. Residents realized they weren't alone in feeling intimidated, and together, they felt stronger. A petition calling for reforms within the HOA quickly gained signatures, including those of former supporters who had grown disillusioned with Karen's leadership. But the real blow came when Evelyn uncovered evidence of financial mismanagement tied to the HOA's towing contracts. Through her connections, she discovered that Karen had personally approved inflated towing fees, pocketing a small percentage of each transaction as a consultation fee. While not technically illegal, the practice raised serious ethical questions. When Evelyn presented this information to the HOA board, it became clear that Karen's days as president were numbered. Facing mounting pressure, Karen tried to save face by offering a public apology at the next meeting. "I may have made mistakes," she admitted reluctantly, though her tone suggested she didn't truly believe it. "But my intentions have always been to protect our neighborhood." Unfortunately for her, the damage was done. Neighbors saw through the insincerity, and several openly challenged her during the Q&A session, demanding transparency and accountability. By the end of the month, Karen resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. In reality, she knew she had lost all credibility and feared further scrutiny of her actions. True to form, she quietly packed up her belongings and moved out of the neighborhood shortly afterward, leaving behind only rumors and lingering resentment. For Evelyn, the victory wasn't about triumphing over Karen. It was about restoring trust and fairness to the community. As she watched her neighbors come together to elect new leadership and rewrite outdated rules, she felt proud of what they'd accomplished. The HOA was far from perfect, but it was finally becoming what it was meant to be, a force for unity rather than division. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a place where everyone truly belonged. With Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood entered a new chapter, one defined by reflection, reform, and renewal. The sudden departure of their self-appointed enforcer left many residents feeling both relieved and slightly uneasy. For years, Karen's presence had loomed large over the community, dictating every aspect of life with an iron fist. Now, without her constant oversight, people weren't sure what to expect. Would things improve, or would chaos ensue? Evelyn saw this uncertainty as an opportunity to guide the neighborhood toward positive change. She didn't seek formal leadership. Instead, she worked behind the scenes, encouraging others to step up and take ownership of their community. Her quiet confidence inspired neighbors who had previously stayed silent to volunteer for roles on the HOA board. Among them were Lisa, a young mother passionate about creating family-friendly spaces, and Mr. Patel, a retired accountant eager to bring transparency to the association's finances. Together, they formed a diverse team committed to rebuilding trust. Their first order of business was addressing the towing fiasco that had sparked so much tension. Evelyn suggested implementing clear guidelines to prevent arbitrary decisions like the one that led to her car being towed. Under the new policy, vehicles could only be removed if they posed a legitimate safety hazard or violated parking laws, not because someone disliked their appearance. To ensure fairness, all towing requests would require approval from at least 2 board members before action was taken. The reforms didn't stop there. The revamped HOA also tackled some of the more absurd rules that had long frustrated residents. Gone were the restrictions on flowerpot colors and mailbox designs. Instead, the focus shifted to practical matters like maintaining sidewalks, improving street lighting, and organizing seasonal events to foster camaraderie. One particularly popular initiative was the creation of a community garden, where neighbors could grow vegetables and flowers together. It quickly became a hub of activity, drawing families, seniors, and even pets into shared moments of connection. Karen's legacy, however, wasn't entirely erased. During the transition period, several troubling discoveries came to light. An audit of the HOA's financial records revealed that Karen had mismanaged funds earmarked for neighborhood improvements, redirecting them toward frivolous projects like decorative bollards and custom-branded welcome mats. Worse still, her cozy relationship with certain contractors, like the towing company, had resulted in inflated bills that drained resources meant for the community. These revelations shocked even those who had disliked Karen, underscoring just how far she'd gone to maintain her grip on power. Faced with these findings, the new leadership took swift action. They renegotiated contracts, ensuring fair pricing and cutting ties with vendors tied to Karen's questionable dealings. They also established a system of checks and balances to prevent future abuses, including monthly financial reports available to all residents. Transparency became the cornerstone of their efforts, earning widespread praise from the community. As for Karen, her name became something of a cautionary tale. Neighbors often joked about how she'd unknowingly crossed paths with the one person capable of dismantling her empire. Some speculated that she'd moved to another gated community, likely continuing her crusade for perfection elsewhere. Others hoped she'd learned a lesson about humility and empathy. Either way, she was rarely mentioned except in jest, a relic of a darker time. For Evelyn, watching the transformation unfold was deeply rewarding. She hadn't set out to become the neighborhood hero, but she couldn't deny the sense of pride she felt seeing her neighbors unite around common goals. More importantly, she saw tangible proof that accountability and kindness could coexist. Whether it was children playing freely in the cul-de-sac or adults chatting warmly at the community garden, the atmosphere had shifted from one of tension to harmony. Even Max seemed happier, wagging his tail furiously as he greeted familiar faces during their daily walks. Evelyn smiled, knowing that the neighborhood was finally becoming the kind of place she'd envisioned when she first moved in. A true community bound not by rigid rules but by mutual respect and shared values. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, Evelyn believed they were ready to face them together. Months after Karen's departure, the neighborhood had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What was once a community governed by fear and rigid rules now thrived as a vibrant, welcoming place where neighbors genuinely cared for one another. The changes weren't just superficial. They ran deep, touching every aspect of life in the suburb. Evelyn watched with quiet satisfaction as friendships blossomed, laughter filled the air, and a renewed sense of belonging took root. One of the most noticeable shifts was the newfound spirit of collaboration. Gone were the days when residents avoided eye contact or hurried past each other to avoid drawing Karen's attention. Now, impromptu gatherings became commonplace. Front yards turned into lively spaces where kids played soccer while parents chatted over lemonade. Even the annual block party, which had been canceled for years due to logistical challenges, a phrase everyone now recognized as code for Karen's disapproval, made a triumphant return. This time, it featured homemade dishes, live music from a local band, and an epic water balloon fight that left everyone soaked but smiling. The HOA, under its new leadership, embraced a philosophy of inclusivity and flexibility. Lisa spearheaded efforts to create a shared calendar where residents could organize events like movie nights, book clubs, and potlucks. Mr. Patel kept finances transparent, sending out monthly updates that broke down how funds were allocated. Residents were encouraged to voice their ideas at meetings, knowing their input would be valued rather than dismissed. For example, when a teenager suggested repainting the drab concrete walls near the entrance with colorful murals, the proposal received overwhelming support. And soon, the neighborhood had a cheerful artistic landmark to call its own. Evelyn remained active in the community, though she preferred to stay in the background. Her role wasn't about being the center of attention. It was about empowering others to lead. She often joined Lisa and Mr. Patel for brainstorming sessions, offering advice born from her years of experience. When disputes arose, inevitably, they did, she mediated with patience and fairness, reminding everyone that compromise was key to maintaining harmony. Her presence served as a steady anchor, ensuring that the progress they'd made wouldn't slip away. As for the towing lot scandal, it became a running joke among neighbors. Remember when Karen tried to tow Judge Harper's car? Someone would say during a gathering, sparking peals of laughter. No one held grudges anymore, not even toward Karen herself. In fact, some joked that she might show up at the next block party uninvited, eager to see how much things had changed. While unlikely, the mere thought brought smiles to their faces, a testament to how far they'd come. The lessons learned from the ordeal stayed with everyone. Neighbors began approaching disagreements with empathy and understanding, realizing that conflict didn't have to escalate if handled respectfully. They also understood the importance of questioning authority, not out of defiance, but to ensure it served the greater good. Evelyn's quiet strength had shown them that standing up for what's right didn't require grand gestures. Sometimes, all it took was speaking the truth calmly and firmly. For Evelyn, the experience reinforced her belief in humanity's capacity for growth. She saw firsthand how a little courage and compassion could turn a divided group of strangers into a united family. Watching her golden retriever Max romp through the park with children who adored him, or seeing neighbors exchange gardening tips over coffee, reminded her why she'd chosen this place to call home. It wasn't perfect, no community ever was, but it was real, authentic, and alive with possibility. On warm evenings, Evelyn would sit on her porch, sipping tea and observing the world around her. Children chased fireflies, couples strolled hand in hand, and laughter echoed through the streets. The neighborhood felt different now, not because of new paint or updated rules, but because of the invisible bonds tying its residents together. As Evelyn reflected on everything that had transpired, she realized something profound. Justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about creating opportunities for people to do better. And in this little corner of suburbia, they had done just that.